Hello and welcome to episode 174 of the Crate and Crowbar. My name is Chris Thurston and tonight I'm joined by Tom Senior.
Hello.
And special guest Alex Wiltshire.
Good evening.
Welcome back, Alex.
It's good to be here.
It is. It's good to have you here.
It's good to see you.
Thanks. And to hear you. Wow. So, Alex, you were just saying that you understood something about this ZeniMax thing that I don't.
I
like put you on the spot there.
I like the observations that ZeniMax becomes one of the very first companies to make money out of VR.
So the top line on this is that this lawsuit between ZeniMax and Oculus, and Facebook obviously, has been settled.
No. So ZeniMax accused Oculus of stealing its IP in terms of actual code when Carmack went there. I'm really acutely aware that I could be saying libels and things here, but
okay, just put the word accused in front of everything. We're all been journalists here. We know this word.
And they were not found guilty, but individually, Carmack and various other figures at Oculus have got to pay major fines that come to lots and lots of money.
Huh.
And Carmack, I read a Facebook post from Carmack, where he's upset. I think it's quite interesting. The lawyer on ZeniMax side said that, I can't remember the phrase, but like it's one of those kind of legal phrases, which doesn't mean that the Oculus actually took the actual code. It meant that it took code that it was kind of based on. And that was where all the contention, or a lot of the contention, came from. Carmack was like, I'm a software engineer. Either you've taken the code or you haven't. Although he did recognize that stealing a book by changing the characters and changing a few of the words, but keeping all the essence there, is probably stealing. But it's quite interesting copyright law for law nerds.
It is. Because, Carmack is both kind of right and wrong, and it feels like a battle of the metaphors you use to describe whatever it is that happened.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Will this, given that this is what effect will this have on Oculus or on VR or on anything really?
Facebook are backing them. It doesn't feel like it's going to be a financial impediment at all.
No, that's true.
What they're doing. So I imagine they'll just get on with their lives and continue.
Well, Zuck can put the money that he saved on stealing land from native Hawaiians into Oculus.
You were so worried about libel.
Allegedly.
There you go.
That's right. Alex is like, let's take this up a notch.
Yeah, exactly. In for a penny.
High enough.
In for a penny. In for the rest of my money.
Put all the books in.
So that was news one on today's news. That seemed like the most serious businessy news, which is why I didn't understand
it's
it.
The most serious than the thing we knew the least about.
Indeed,
yeah. Good that we led with it.
You can tell that all of our
I think so, yeah.
You can tell that all of our careers have led us further and further away from the news beat.
You really do know.
Yeah. Fuck all idea what's happening. But there was also a Stellaris expansion announced today, I noted, and I think a Galciv expansion on the same day.
Yeah,
because everybody knows that February 2nd is the day of the year when you're allowed to announce an expansion for your 4X space game. But I only know details of the Stellaris one. Given that's a game we talked about a little bit. It's interesting to note that they're going with proper endgame stuff by the sounds of things. So vast kind of things to build in space, like Dyson spheres and ring worlds, and a big picture of Arthur C. Clarke himself floating through space. They didn't confirm the last one, but I'm guessing.
That's what I like about it. I like that they're just going almost book by book from the sort of hard sci-fi canon and introducing bit by bit all of the ideas that have been introduced over the last sort of 30 or 40 years.
I'd actually quite like someone to make the Foundation game, to go like full Asimov.
Oh, that'd be
and
great,
have the one where, because actually this would be an amazing solution to the 4X problem, which would be you play the very beginning of the strategy game, and then it cuts the middle game out completely and just skips you to the end and shows you like what, and then you have to solve the end state for whatever civilization you've created.
What was that Fable game? Was it Fable 2 or 3 that did that, where it skips your head 10 years and suddenly...
Fable
2.
For 2.
For 2.
Fable the 2.
Yeah, the equivalent for 4X.
Yeah.
See, that would be pretty special because you'd have to start the game thinking, oh, this is going to point it in the direction I want.
Yeah, you have to start the game knowing that, like, turn 50, your civilization is going to seal ideas, people, technologies, and cultural concepts away in a vault. And then that's going to emerge from a vault in 10,000 years, and then you'll take control again 1,000,000 years after that. And that's the civilization you have to negotiate.
Interesting.
That would be good.
You can get really angry about past you for stupid things that you decided.
Exactly. That would be good. But that's not what they're doing. What they're doing is the strict late game of Stellaris. It sounds like there's also going to be like ascendancy paths for your civilization, whether that's a sort of technological singularity or or I think a psychic kind of, coming of age. Not coming of age. That's not a psychic coming of age is X-Men.
The end of 2001 The Space Odyssey, basically.
Yeah, like what form of kaleidoscope space baby
do you want to be?
Yeah, exactly. And it also sounds quite a lot like the three endings of Mass Effect, the three things they posited.
3 colours.
Yeah. And given that Stellaris feels very heavily inspired by Mass Effect's galaxy map and its, kind of take on interstellar diplomacy and even the soundtrack, it feels like it's quite nice that maybe that's your entire civilization could very slowly become green or blue or red. I mean, I say that I actually like Mass Effect's ending, but I think I might be the only.
I didn't hate it. I mean, I was so primed to hate it because the hatred for it was just so ridiculous that, but when the bar was so low, it was fine. I was like, yeah, that is just kind of a dumb space ending, but every space thing I watch has a dumb space ending. So it seemed on the equivalent level to me.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the bar was set at Battlestar.
Exactly.
We all move up and down either side of Battlestar. Incidentally, I read a news story on PCGamer.com, today, about, I think the writer of The Expanse, which is a sci-fi show I haven't actually watched, but does have, Elias Toufexis in it, who's Adam Jensen. So there you go. Wrote either an interview or a thing where he just said how much he hated the ending of Mass Effect and he vowed not to do that with his own show.
Right.
So that's throwing the gauntlet down then. You haven't given yourself the comfort of knowing that it's fine to have a totally bollocks ending to your sci-fi epic because no one else has done it properly. He's thrown down and established that no, he's going to get it right.
I love that people still care so much about this. Like, how many years is it since Mass Effect 3 came
5.
out? Oh my god.
It came out right after I joined PC Gamer.
The anger this still generates is astonishing.
Yeah.
Considering. And I don't know. I mean, there's an amazing kind of Limmy sketch, and Brian Lemons is a Scottish comedian, and he's got a little sketch where a guy is sitting there and he reads something online. He gets really angry and kind of, heated up about it, and he starts complaining. Then a tiny little man in a cap appears out of nowhere and goes, "Got a reaction, didn't they? Got a reaction." And this is what I keep thinking about the Mass Effect ending. However bad it was, they got a fucking reaction out of it, and that's part of the kind of psyche of gamers now, like who enjoy sci-fi games. The Mass
Effect
doesn't
exist. Like if can a game exist if people don't get angry about it?
Well, not anymore.
Tree in the forest.
Yeah, exactly.
2017.
If a Mass Effect ends in a forest and no one creates a petition, did it ever exist? Yeah, I don't know. It's funny because, I mean, you could, I think we all have experience of people being extremely upset about nothing in space.
Space causes upset.
Yeah.
That's what it does.
And incidentally, extremely upset about nothing in space was the working title for Mass Effect Andromeda, I think. But yeah, and it's funny because even now that hangs over Andromeda, which I've started to get excited about. Maybe I don't think we've talked about it recently and it's out next month. But they've started to get into that part of the marketing cycle where they start to show a little bit more than just kind of like, atmospheric panning shot of a bit of concept art. And I'm properly on board now for like another adventure in that universe, even though I suspect it's going to be a lot more like Dragon Age Inquisition, and that's going to upset people. It's also going to be a Mass Effect game that's going to upset people on principle.
Just gathering like a Katamari ball of upset.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's also going to be pretty progressive by all accounts, and that's going to upset people. The YouTube comments for that game are now an amazing train wreck. So if it has anything less than like an incredible ending, but not even an incredible ending anymore. It has to be an ending very specifically tuned to the people who will now hate it for 3 incredibly virulent reasons.
It's amazing. Well, how have BioWare games become this kind of great coming together of hate?
I know.
Why? I mean,
it's weird, isn't it?
It's strange how they've attracted so much negativity.
It's quite a thoughtful Canadian company.
I know,
I know.
just making quite gentle dramas.
But it feels like, without getting too much into it, it feels like the world has changed profoundly around what BioWare do, like they were always the more progressive RPG developer, but not just in terms of the characters or the storylines, but in terms of sort of cinematic presentation of the RPG. Like Mass Effect, that was what Mass Effect did, was like merge the third person action game with amazing cutscenes with the RPG where you can choose your own path. And people get super invested in that. And I think everyone got very invested in that because it's a great fantasy and it's a very appealing thing. But then what subsequently happened is the other sensibilities of that studio come out, which is that the games tend to be pretty progressive and they tend to, showcase characters and situations. And as the industry as a whole has matured, Mass Effect has always been pretty much on I'd argue Dragon Age more so, but Mass Effect has been on the pretty far edge of pushing for better, more diverse representation in games, particularly mainstream games. I should clarify. Games what have AAA financial backing. And I think there are people who are maybe on board when they were first promised a space adventure game where you can bang aliens and punch people, who are now probably angrier than they've ever existentially been by where that series has ended up. And yet the entire rest of the world has tilted themwards in a kind of spectacular way. So, Mass Effect is now this sort of glorious island of like the game, the games industry as was not doing.
It feels like, because the games industry is always on this tremendous lag. It feels like a lot of games that are coming out that are kind of embrace that progressive wave. So, and that will continue for the next year or so.
God, I hope it doesn't go away.
Well, you know what? Seeing a lot of studios speak out vociferously against the travel ban in particular, like obviously a lot of them are thinking, the bottom line because they have staff who are directly affected and that affects their ability to make games and stuff. But, I think that the mainstream game industry, is one of the most progressive, I think, gender balance in the workplace and all that kind of thing aside. But I think that isn't so much a problem with the industry itself in terms of the business, but more about the culture of games, and wider. But I think, it's progressive. I think I'd be really surprised if we saw games going into the nasty lands.
The nasty lands. I think actually that's where the finale of Dragon Age Inquisition takes place.
It's just the end.
I think you're probably right. It's just interesting that the conversation around it, given that apparently our industry was the test bed for at least online hyper right-wing activism. Who'd thunk it? Yeah. 2 years ago.
Us.
And those themes are still, there are now stock phrases that can be rolled out to describe things that make people uncomfortable. Like, I think maybe that's the thing that I've noticed is that angry comment man, whoever he is, he persists throughout time, used to, I think, borrow phrases from outside of games to object to whatever he was seeing in, for example, the BioWare game. Things should be politically correct or something like that. And now there's this whole kind of set of memes and ideas, like a new sort of lexicon for being reactionarily angry about the fact that a game has a woman in it. Right? Like, amazing, well, I say amazing, horrifying comments under Mass Effect, like, I think this character is the SJW one. And and therefore I cannot buy. And I guess my fear is that if it gets accepted not by enough people in the games community, that eventually it gets picked up on by. I think I no longer trust that we are a totally isolated, strange little bubble of culture that will never inform anything outside of it. And I fear for the day where a games developer, either in a positive or a negative sense, says, and this character is our SJW1. And I think you're right, that probably won't happen, but I giving up on saying that's probably not going to happen after the year that has just passed.
It's a legitimate fear. It's a legitimate fear.
Speaking of legitimate fear, I'm going to segue out of this. Have we all played a little bit of Resident Evil 7?
A little bit.
Because Alex, I suspect your experience of it might be quite similar to mine.
Okay, shall I take you through mine?
Yeah.
I installed it thinking, I'm going to do this. And it was about like 10:30 when it finally finished. And I thought, right, have a half an hour go before bed. It was dark and quiet in the house. And I walked through the start area, outside in the daytime. I walked around the house. I got into the backyard and I went inside the room, into the sort of the shack sort of thing in the back door. And, the door closed behind me. The lights went out, the torch went on, and I just went, nope, and switched it off. The next day I sort of steeled myself and played a bit more, and I found a body in some nasty water in the bottom of the thing. I did play the demo, so I knew kind of what to expect from that bit. But obviously the bit before it. And again, I went, nope. I wanted to play it with my wife, who would, mostly because she would give me the impetus to push me to play it, to go on.
Yeah.
Because on my own, I couldn't play Aliens Isolation in more than 5-minute segments. So I don't really know what the pacing of the game is really. All I know it is this getting too terrified to continue. I'm not good at horror games. What was your experience?
Remarkably similar. Door closed, lights went off. I went, fuck this. Closed the game. I've played, according to Steam, 17 minutes of Resident Evil over the course of 4 sessions. And so I loaded back up again. I got in a corridor. I opened a drawer. I went, fuck this. And then I loaded it again. I walked across the room. I took the lid off a pot. There was a creepy bug. I said, fuck this again. And I went back to it, got as far as the main menu, and then went, actually, what am I doing? And closed it.
Why am I doing this?
And I think, for me, it's obviously beautifully presented and stuff. And the stupid thing is, it's obviously really hit and miss with me, because I did all of PT.
You could do PT?
Yeah, I could do PT, and I can't do this.
PT. That really messed me up.
So, the reason I wanted to talk about this, because you told me you played more of it now.
I think I'm about halfway through now.
Okay, so you've hit its groove, right? You're on horror needle has settled into the...
I'm in its rhythm.
Yeah, you're in its rhythm.
Did you get into like a rhythm in something like Alien Isolation?
Yeah, I beat Alien Isolation. I can get through horror games and enjoy them a lot, though I can't play them for long periods. But, bit by hour, I get through them. And I like being scared. I enjoy horror films. I enjoy kind of horror concepts as much as anything. Just the idea of just weird reality distorting horror, which games ought to be very good at. But one of my complaints about games is that they don't do enough with, their premise, their ability to change reality around you.
Tangier's coming up.
Oh yeah, well, I can't wait to play that. Yeah. Eventually gets released. But yeah.
Yeah, so because I love horror as well, particularly in other forms, and I played Alien Isolation, I could play PT, but I realized that Alien Isolation, in I think some senses, a little bit ruined other horror games for me, particularly other horror games that aren't completely novel with how whatever setting they're putting you in. Because, Spooky Texas Chainsaw Massacre House and Space Station What with Alien in it are both cinematic, pretty standard settings for horror, right? You've seen both of them before. The thing that I loved about Alien that I found hard to do in other contexts is Alien got me to stop guessing what the developer was going to do. Which, and to be honest, that, I got bored of horror movies that weren't amazing after a while because it became an exercise in going through the same beats. And the beats weren't, which a lot of movies are like that. But in other movies, the beats are pleasant. Whereas I find that in a lot of, middling horror movies, it's unpleasant to be surprised by a spooky thing or to see something gross. But you're not seeing anything new. You're not being scared in a new way or having an experience you haven't had before. So, it's just, recycling the same ideas. And you learn to look out for the cue that you're about to get the jump scare or whatever it is, right? And so the great thing about Isolation was because it's genuinely frightening, but it's controllably frightening in a really interesting way, because you know that the creature has AI, and sometimes it's going to fuck you up completely, and sometimes it's going to be somewhere you don't expect it to be. But most of the time, a designer didn't put it there just to fuck with you. You know, that just happened. And so I found it terrifying, but in a really engaging way, where you're in its world, and it's like a little simulator of like, what's it like to be hunted by this awful thing. Whereas, Resi, when I started playing it, I realized what it was, like, really quickly, which was like, oh, okay. I mean, maybe, I know that it changes tack when you get guns and there's more, you know, more game later on. But when you get into that initial bit, and there's no spoilers because I haven't played enough of it to spoil anything, but there's that, like, moment where you're like, you creep under the skull fence in the backyard of Doom, and you see, like, the creepy farmer man walk past, and you get around the corner, and where could he possibly have gone? Because he vanished into a wall or something like that. You know, there's a sort of, and it's like, even before I'd seen him walk out a shot, I knew he wouldn't be there when I went around the corner. I knew it would be impossible for him to be there. And I knew, you know, and I felt like I understood the logic of what it was setting up and where that all leads so well that all that was left was the unpleasant surprise. Yeah. If you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to get used to opening drawers and locking my narrow field of view into these things. And then the third one or the fourth one or the fifth one or the seventh one is going to be the one where it activates the Jack in the Box. And I've seen that trick a million times.
You're in the machine.
Yeah. And like, I know, and I think maybe I don't enjoy that type of horror enough to look forward to the shitting myself moment, you know? So, I mean, because this is totally unfair in one sense, because I haven't played enough of the game, right? Like, I kept switching it off. But that was the reason I kept switching it off and went to play some Overwatch or something instead, because I didn't feel, nothing from the beginning of the game communicated to me that I was about to have an experience I hadn't had before.
Because that was the interesting thing about PT was that it really did play with expectations. Like, the game was a constant loop that was about you trying to figure out what is going to trigger something new. And that actually made you a part of the mechanism. Yeah. Whereas, I agree. Like, at the moment, Resident Evil 7 it feels like you're just in the machine. You're not kind of manipulating it.
Yeah. Like, I mean, PT is also a linear ride to a substantial extent.
It is, but you are the one that's working out the next step.
It's funny because, in a sense, the repetition of that one set of corridors encourages you to be very vigilant for details, but not in a way that really lets it trap you very much.
Exactly.
Like, it doesn't, like, you know, the most horrifying things in PT, and I feel like we can talk about it fairly openly now, like, when you go around the corner and there's
you can download it.
There's a figure in the window and she hasn't been there before, and there's a little shock of seeing that, but it is not the control taken away from you surprise thing. It's just there in the environment. You could miss it. Yeah. And actually some of the joy of PT is realizing that you missed some fucking horrible things. Yeah. And the kind of, I think maybe that's what I love about Alien as well, is the sort of thrill that it was always there, even if you didn't notice it. Yeah. And then the you know, the big, you know, fuck you player moment in PT, which is when you get your neck broken, which is horrible. But, you know, it gives you, like, all of these little jumping on points for what's about to happen, and realizing what's about to happen as you progress into the environment. It's only when you get to a certain point that it finally, like, does that thing of, like, having built the tension for so long, like, pulling the trigger on a scare. By all accounts, you know, hopefully Resi does stuff that's that kind of well orchestrated, but I had that feeling playing it of, like, which one of these press F to use prompts is going to be the one. And it feels, you know,
like the relationship with horror cinema, though. I think I get differently scared. I definitely think it isn't that close to my appreciation for horror cinema, because my fears, my conscious fear during a horror game is the loss of progress. Mm-hmm. And often, like, and also my fears for inability to succeed as well. Whereas obviously watching a horror film, like, you are totally passive in that experience. You know, you're kind of, you know, you're watching other people making mistakes and you get frustrated with them, and or you kind of, oh, don't look there, you know, all that kind of thing. Whereas in a game, like, I'm just going, I just want to get to the next save point, which was like my Alien Isolation thing was this sort of tension run as I sort of got closer to the beep and then finally got the, you know, key card in.
I think that's the thing for me. The reason Alien was so kind of like revolutionary in my view was that, so like most horror games won't let you do the sensible thing that you're always wishing the person in the movie would do. Or if they do let you do it, they force you to fail in certain ways. Like you're always going to get knocked back from the spooky door by the scary man or whatever. And nothing you do would have circumvented that. And Alien definitely has points like that. But for the most part, if you can pull it off somehow, sprinting through the level could work.
Could work.
There's nothing systemic about the way the game is, the rules of the game that says that that's not going to work. Yeah. And the rules that say it probably won't are completely fair because they're based on how much noise you're making and the fact that there are maybe other people in the level that might be alerted to you. But in some cases, sprinting is the right thing to do because, you know, there are other humans in the level and they amount to noisy food and distractions that are a finite resource. And if you can get through it quickly and get out of your habit of hiding under every table and looking for every audio log, then you'll get through it. And maybe it's not perfect, but you did it. Yeah. Whereas I feel like, I don't necessarily feel the same pull anymore of exploring to find out what the next trap is that the designer has laid for me. But Tom, you've played way more Resident Evil than I have, so I'm interested.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's better than that because when it opens out, it starts to give you, like a considerable amount of space to explore and actually gradually master. So the first significant kind of, amount of space you're given is like 2 floors and a basement area, and you start to actually kind of gradually discover the house, understand it, master it, understand the limitations of the creature in it. And it's actually a process of kind of slowly gaining control over it. And then as soon as you've done that, obviously there are scares through that process. It moves you to a new area, and then you master that second area. And they're all they all have their own separate kind of horror things they're doing. So the one I'm in at the moment is all about insects, which I find really hard to get through because I hate giant insects in games and that kind of thing. But it's very much kind of insect themed, swamp, Louisiana swamp kind of bit. And the way it kind of, it's not just about going through those tight, kind of openings anymore and then waiting for the scare. It's about understanding the threats in that area and then learning to cope with them and overcome them by discovering items, by discovering enemy behavior. And then as soon as you're comfortable with it, it moves you on again. So that's the pacing of Resident Evil 7, actually, like once you actually get into it.
That sounds more like Dark Souls.
Yeah, kind of. It doesn't feel like it at all, but no. I understand that it's that kind of mastering area by area. Yeah. Definitely that there's some similarity to that. And because the areas are so well presented and feel so disgusting and different, when you move between those areas, like it's, even though you're moving between familiar genres, you're so in that place because of the presentation and the just astonishing lighting and texture work in that game, that I'm completely fixated on it. I'm definitely going to finish it.
Yeah, that makes it a lot more appealing. I so wish it opened like that in a way. I know that.
Yeah, I think it has to kind of.
I appreciate it. It's kind of it's getting it's establishing shots, isn't it?
Yeah, it's also teaching you stuff about the family and what their various kind of. How they operate.
I haven't even met a member of them yet.
Okay, yeah. Basically, they become like individual characters and they have their different ways of hunting and their different kind of types of trap that they set. So there is a greater level of depth to the villains of it that you don't necessarily realise when you're in the default Texas Chainsaw Massacre bit. So you, like very early on, you're sat at the table with them and it's just taken straight from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like just directly lifted, like the same archetypes are there. But with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you see them in brief moments of just horrible, like, massacre. But in this game, you have to actually deal with them and how they think and how they kind of want to kill you, which is a new type of horror. And that is they've added an extra layer to that very staid and understandable Texas Chainsaw thing. So in that sense, actually, as a game, it has brought an extra dimension to very familiar tropes, horror tropes, I think. And given that it's very well paced as well, I think. And there's some very interesting, it expects you to fail and have to repeat things a lot. And it has just some batshit behaviours that you'll suddenly see just on your third playthrough that will completely throw you. So to take one example, like you're trapped with a bad guy in a garage and you can get in the car and use it to attack him. But on one random playthrough I did, he just got in the car and started driving it around I didn't even know he could do that. But there's some sort of dice roll happens where his behaviour will change, and it's like that PT moment where it pulls the trigger and you don't have a choice, your neck gets broken. But the way it does it kind of subverts what you think they can do to such an extent that it keeps it really kind of tense and interesting. And it's interesting because the Alien Isolation comparison is interesting, because I love Alien Isolation as a piece of design, as a piece of kind of simulated, dynamic kind
emergent
of
horror.
Exactly, yeah, just a sandbox that tries to kill you. Whereas this is more targeted because they can talk to you and they can have a voice, the enemies, and they can occupy these tropes and kind of use them to taunt you, basically, in a way that the Alien can't. And the interesting thing about the Alien is that it is this unknowable, just primal force, but it's quite tame now because the Alien franchise has been so kind of stretched out.
So you see, and I know exactly all the things that alien can do. And
yeah, precisely. The alien's not going to get in a car and try and run you over in the garage. Whereas
it'd be hilarious if that happened.
It would be amazing.
But if an alien did kill Jeremy Clarkson, maybe it could, because of that morphing
let's hope
they do.
Is that the new series of Top Gear?
Not Top Gear.
Oh no, of course not.
Top Gear.
What's it called?
The Grand Tour.
The Grand Tour.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think if you haven't enjoyed what you've seen so far, you're not going to enjoy the game, to be honest, because those scares and those kind of turning off points are recurrents. Like, you're going to be experiencing.
Damn it! I thought it was all going to change.
See, maybe I just need to like be in the right mood for it. I think like Alex, I would benefit from playing it with somebody.
Would Pip play with you?
Pardon?
Would Pip play with you?
No. Pip does not like scary games. No.
The thing is, you and I fundamentally don't either, but we're stupid.
Yes, that's true. Like, we persevere for no reason. I think, like it's, cause it's not so much the scares. It's almost like you're not getting the full experience if you're not sharing certain things with people.
One of my favorite, companionable play experiences recently was, the PlayStation 4 game, Into Dawn.
Until Dawn. Me and Marsh played that together.
Yeah.
I found, and it's without playing with someone else, it's a kind of slightly dodgy game.
I think it's a terrible game.
But together, like, it just
so
transcends all the things that are on the disc.
So
like, I mean, also, because
enormously.
there are things in that game that are total bollocks. I think like any sort of designed horror game is going to have to confront you with things that are either, subversive and exciting or bollocks. And there's a really fine line in game design between that subverted my expectations and I'm excited, and that subverted my expectations, and this is the worst game I've ever played. And I think, I know Until Dawn has its fans. I think I've spoken on the podcast before. Like, I think it's awful, but I think it's awful because it's arbitrary about how it assigns consequences.
But also, but I think that it's also designed to be played with people.
Yeah.
Like, it wants the people in the room to be going, oh, I hate that person, or oh, look at that what happened, and oh, that shouldn't, oh my god, it doesn't. Its mind is not on coherence. Its mind is on what can we do to people.
And so those moments where you're just sort of arbitrarily decapitated and you lose a character for basically no reason or whatever, like that's. It's not fine, but it's like when you're playing with somebody, you're like,
I loved
hey!
it. Loved it. On my own, that would be the worst.
Yeah. And so, but I think even if a game does that subversive stuff well, it still benefits from the kind of the pass the pad kind of school of play. It's possibly why these games do so well on YouTube as well, that they're natural kind of social.
Oh yeah, Five
experience
Nights at Freddy's. It's like, it's a really social game.
Yeah, whereas actually I think Alien Isolation is a really terrible social game because it requires it leans a lot on your intuitive, internal, non-vocalized sense of where the alien is and what it's thinking. And that's really hard to communicate to people.
I think I'm going to walk from this room to the next one. Oh, walk to the next room.
Yeah. There's no because there are none of those don't open the drawer, there's a hand or something. You can't,
it's the stereo sound is so important to that game as well. You can't say, I'm hearing it from the left and up, so I think I might go right. It just doesn't work. And people don't watch YouTube with stereo headphones on necessarily.
Yeah. So it is funny,
the
space within that genre it's quite a profound difference despite there being so many surface similarities between those those two games. So, interesting. But maybe I should persevere with it. I think I don't want to just watch a YouTube video. I do want to have had that experience.
I'll come round tomorrow night.
Okay.
We'll hold each other all the way
Yeah,
through.
yeah, exactly. Hold hands. Get on the PlayStation, have a sleepover, it'll be fine. It's not like mega long, is it?
No, it's not very long, and it also becomes hilariously like Resident Evil-y in the way it kind of gates you from areas with big stupid brass locks that are carvings of like centurions with a shield missing, and you have to find the metal shield. It's like it's a fucking hovel in Louisiana. Why is this stuff here? But it's very funny. It's very good.
Yeah, all right, fine. I'll get past 17 minutes. I feel a bit bad for having kind of like slagged it off, having barely played it. But yeah.
No, totally valid criticisms. This is why I didn't like Outlast, which is very much like Resident Evil.
Oh, that's interesting because I really didn't like Outlast. I mean, I kind of respect it, but I really didn't enjoy any of it.
The first hour of Resi 7 is Outlast, and then it actually becomes a Resident Evil game after that, is what I would say.
Oh, interesting. Because I have played all the other Resis. Well, most of them.
I haven't played.
Didn't play 6.
I didn't play 6 either. It's I only talked about this last week. It's still weird they put a number on this.
Yeah,
like
it is,
as a culture, we've gotten we're okay with the idea of reboots, even using the same name as the original game reboot, so you just call it Resident Evil or whatever.
Well, the first 3 make sense, like because they're so similar.
Yeah, they are. I mean, even to 4, I would say.
I mean, the same characters.
I think the trouble is they've been gradually remastering the original games quite recently. So
yeah, they've done 0 and HD and
then Resident Evil like a couple of years ago. So it might be a bit too close.
They could have given it a nonsense name like Code Veronica.
That's true.
Do you remember Code?
I do. That was a good one.
That was a good one. That was the first Resident Evil game I played.
Dreamcast.
Yeah, because I was a Dreamcast kid.
Nice.
Which is why I don't know anything about anything, because there were no games. So that's Resi. What else have you been playing, Tom?
I'm going to link this back to the news a little bit.
Okay.
Because the Final Fantasy creators have been talking a bit about putting Final Fantasy 15 onto PC. Not in any way that's just as confirmed.
Hang on a minute, can you remind me which one that is? Is that the MMO or is that...
No, 15 is the one that was released.
The new one?
Yeah, the proper big Final Fantasy.
The Lads on Tour one.
Lads on Tour in a car. Everyone's wearing black suits, top bants, just killing random wildlife. And they keep on talking about it, and they've put all of the other Final Fantasy games onto PC bit by bit. So they're clearly, there's a project there to bring Final Fantasy to PC properly. And there's a news story this week about them even adding mod support and stuff like that. So they're obviously seriously thinking about it.
Good lord, mod support in a Final Fantasy game.
Yeah, a 200-foot tall naked chocobo.
Yeah, there you go.
Boss fight.
Aren't chocobos already naked?
They're feathered.
They wear like armor and stuff as well.
Feathers aren't clothes.
Oh, true. Does that mean dogs are naked?
Yes. Well, unless they're wearing a collar, in which case they're naked except for a collar. Alex, you can see their bits.
It's true.
It's true.
You can. All these images flash through my mind.
Every dog you've ever seen has been naked except that one adorable one in the Santa outfit.
I knew there was something more wholesome about it.
We've gotten off-piste somewhat. Tom, you were saying?
Yeah, Final Fantasy 15, which has been my big Christmas game. It's the game I've kind of languished with and just enjoyed and kind of dipped into, and just to be in the mood of it, even though it's a fucking stupid game in so many ways. It's the idea of kind of a bunch of friends getting into a car and kind of going on tour, and so much money going into the production of that stupid fantasy is brilliant. So I'm completely 100% behind it. And I've beat the game, and the story has been completely massacred by some invisible, horrible development trauma, that will come out over the next few years, I'm sure, as people do kind of post-mortems of the game. But having beaten the game, you can use a dog to time travel back into the open world section.
A dog?
Yeah. So,
well,
is the dog clothed?
The dog was not clothed. Okay. The dog was fully naked. So not safe for work, if you're going to, be playing it in front of your friends. And yeah, so it's so hacked. It's such a hack at the end of the game. It's like, oh, we'll put you back to your last save point, and then contact a dog, and the dog will transport you back in time to the place where you could just explore the open world.
Is the dog established as a plot device?
Vaguely. The dog is a courier that transports messages between you and a queen that you're supposed to, a princess you're supposed to marry. The dog is the in-between.
This game.
Game. I said it.
Boys on tour, dogs curious,
But,
princesses.
oh my god, millions, like tens of millions of dollars have gone into this. Hundreds, surely. I mean, it's astonishingly lavish in the way all the presentation is just beautiful.
I like the food. I like the food photos.
Astonishing.
I love that, yeah.
So one of your pals, he's a chef, the only person in the world who could cook things for you. And, he learns recipes everywhere. Like he'll walk past someone in the street and a little cutscene will happen where he snaps his fingers and goes, my goodness. And then someone else will go, what is it, Ignis? And he'll go, I've discovered a new recipe. And he's just looked at this poor woman's food and gone, what if I combine beans with toast? I could make something completely mind-blowing. And
Guy Fieri.
Sometimes, you'll just sort of completely brutalize like a herd of just placid cattle. And afterwards, having gained your experience and maybe a high potion, he'll go, I've got an idea for a new recipe. I was like, what, is it mashed cattle, mate? Like, that's how he gets his, and then it'll add it'll add that meal to your menu whenever you camp and he'll cook it for you. But, the amount of money that's gone into this is stupid. So it'll show you the food and it's the most fucking beautifully rendered food I've ever seen in a video game. It's astonishing. The amount of work and artistry that's gone into representing like beans on toast. The most basic recipe is a piece of unbuttered toast. And it's so lovingly textured. And just like, I just wanted to pick, like Willy Wonka, reach into the screen and take it out and just nosh on it. And, just, if that's what the food is like, imagine just what the rest of the game is like. I'm really in love with it. In spite of all its terrible, broken flaws.
It sounds like you've sold it to me.
No, there you go. If you want to eat some amazing...
I don't know if I can wait for it to come out on PC.
No, you should play it. It's really funny. It's quite a time sink, but there are some good kind of just leveling and money earning cheaty bits on the internet that let you just kind of enjoy it for what it is.
See,
I love it.
Because I've ambiently absorbed so many different people playing this, because it was like Twitter's Game of Christmas again, as far as I understood it. I still have no idea what you do in it or why.
No one knows. I had to look it up after I'd beaten the game, what it all was really all about. You're kind of you're a prince and you've got like the prince's guard. They're your best buds and they all cram into a car with you and you're supposed to drive very slowly to, meet the person you're supposed to marry. And after that,
see, I like that as a setting. That's
how it starts. I buy that. And that's the first kind of basically third to half of the game. By far the part of the game they finished basically. And then after that, it's just trash. Just complete nonsense.
Does it just go Final Fantasy? So it has this sort of, weird villain with a sword and kind of world ending things.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's also, it doesn't help that a lot of the kind of backstory and the kind of lore underpinning of it was basically released in a film that no one is ever going to watch. Oh, yeah. But none of that is included in the game. None of the kind of facts of it. There's no journal you can access to find out what the hell happened or what the significance of anything is or why it matters that, X person dies or this person has done the X. And it's full of the same kind of fantasy, just bollocks jargon that, is throughout all Final Fantasies. There's a crystal, and it's vaguely mystical. There are gods basically that you have to kind of capture and bring onto your side.
See, that sort of stuff works fine when you're in this sort of, where it's super deformed kind of little kind of anime characters. As soon as you've got realistic food and like, and a Rolls Royce,
absolutely.
Like, it's just sort of, and like, isn't there a garage towards the start of the game that you kind of go to? I think as soon as a game has a garage in it, like, you can't really do world-ending kind of mystical crystals and stuff.
I mean,
that's my general rule, I think.
Right.
You have to pick crystals or a garage. On what is the fundamental unit of technology in this universe?
Yeah.
You can't have like a manual labourer who replaces the crystals.
Either
in your magic.
Yeah.
roller.
Either you got a wizard or a mechanic. Nothing in between.
Well, I mean, I think it was, was it Arthur C. Clarke who said that a suitably advanced mechanic is indistinguishable from a wizard?
You're right. He got there first. Arthur Clarke really did foresee everything in games.
He did, yeah.
Final Fantasy has not thought that deeply about any of these guys. I'll be honest. It's on a much lower level. But I love the road trip. It's brilliant. It's really satisfying to kind of be through areas and get kind of hunts from local diners. They're like, oh, go and kill this dragon.
A hunt,
yeah. Hunt this dragon and buy some beans. And that's what I want to do, apparently, at Christmas, is just hunt a dragon and buy some beans. So,
because I mean, that would also clash with Alex's assertion that you can't have like high and low fantasy in the same in the same space.
It does mash them together in a deeply satisfying way.
Yeah.
Until the story actually tries to do stuff.
Maybe that's why, even though there's been a million of these games, they're called Final Fantasy.
Well, they're all apocalypse scenarios. Yeah.
But partly the apocalypse scenario, but also partly because it's the point at which fantasy has nowhere else to go.
I like that. It's the ceiling.
Yeah.
You can't go outside of these bounds.
No,
they keep getting
garages,
wider.
beans and dragons.
Exactly. Every fantasy at once.
How can this work? It doesn't. The world ends.
Yeah, exactly. Good stuff. Alex, what have you been up to?
It's funny you should mention load fantasy because I've been playing Conan Exiles.
Is that so? I had no idea what that was until I realised it was one of them Rust games. What with the ding dongs in them?
Because I really love a nice survival game. I really don't like survival games.
No one likes
I was going to question you on the first half of that sentence, Alex, because no one likes survival games.
I don't understand. So this game, I was really surprised by it. I didn't realise just how much it was like Ark. I really didn't like Ark. I thought that I couldn't really understand how Ark existed as a released in early access. Okay, but a release game. It ran. This is like a year, I don't know, a while ago, but like it ran like bum on my PC. It was just unpleasant, and I didn't know what to do. Everything just was horrible. I just like dinosaurs. That's why I wanted to play it. I just love dinosaurs, and I wanted to play a game with dinosaurs in it. It's interesting. Conan Exiles, like, it's the kind of game that a studio that had put a lot of money into building an MMO back when MMOs were kind of what you did, to get big player bases and stuff. It's what a big studio who's burned a crap load of money on doing that and probably hasn't seen quite the returns it wanted to would do. Because survival games are, as kind of crowd-pleasing things, are pretty cheap to make, I would say.
Because you don't have to finish them, apparently.
And you don't have to finish them. And and it's all in the grind, it's all, you don't have to make any content. You just put a new crafting, sort of tier in and there you go, there's some content. And it feels like that. What I quite enjoyed about it was, well, obviously the dongs. They were great. If you haven't seen the dongs, I recommend visiting the works of Christopher Livingston because it's wonderful.
Don correspondent Chris Livingston.
Unwilling Don correspondent. So I fiddled around with my dong, and immediately after getting off, there's a naked dead body just in front of me as soon as I spawned. There we are.
It's quite a start.
And then I was just really surprised just how much it is like Ark, like in all of the crafting systems and all of the things that you do. And you're meant to be a barbarian, meant to be in this kind of grand, low fantasy world of kind of boobs and beasts and stuff like that. And what you do is stare very closely at rocks while you're mining them and stare very closely at tree trunks while you're chopping them. And you stand in shrubs picking them. And that's what I did for a long time to build a very bad looking little kind of Watland daub hut. And I felt that I was being pulled along this thing. I think it's all about the end game though. Its thing is that you build up a clan and build up your fortress, and then you can build great big shrines to your gods, and then through them you can build or summon an avatar, which is this vast towering kind of god that you can control and walk through and smash everything of your enemies.
I wish games would open with that rather than going through the find 50 twigs to make a fire.
But you also know that, I don't know this, but I deeply suspect that every avatar that you can summon is the result of hours of graft, of kind of twig collection.
Absolutely.
And But the dongs, I think
Top
they're
dongs.
amazing. Top dongs. They really do wobble around. That's amazing. And like the NPCs will just go around with just like no trousers. It's incredible.
Wow. That is quite Conan, though, I feel like.
Yeah, no, it's weird how much
Yeah.
it is Ark, but it does feel like it fits with Conan.
Would you accept that they were naked?
With
I'm just trying to figure out where the line is here.
He's wearing
Dogs
a
are
shirt,
naked. Those people are
A
naked.
tunic.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they were. Yeah, but there are quite a lot of pure naked. Lots of very purely naked people.
Pure naked.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe the thing with survival games is it's like maybe the reason you don't have to finish them is because you start the player's journey at like the furthest, like it is like the apple pie from scratch thing where you also have to invent the universe at the beginning, right? Like the player's journey to a fun thing begins with carving their own shoes out of the living earth. Whereas most games would skip you to, you are a level 1 fighter. Here is your gear. Go kill a dragon and then bring me some beans. Like, whereas, survival trades on the fact that you're there because like the warriors of old, you have to make your own shoes.
And drag yourself up by your
Dong
straps.
Oh God. Conan, what is best in life? And it's not that.
I mean, I think that also, like, you can't deny the social aspect. Like, if I was 16, if I was 14, probably 13, I would be, I wouldn't be proud as I am now, but I would be all over this game because it's got tits. I'd be embarrassed about the dongs and I'd be on there with my mates. Oh,
doing what? Punching trees and building fortresses. And like, it's all there. But it's like, it's laggy as hell. Like, it's one of those games where you kind of walk forward and it skips you back because, all that kind of thing. Yeah. So it's a bit technically a mess, but I'm sure that'll get fixed. Sorry, that's the phrase rubber banding dong stuck in my...
Because actually, thinking about it, like, I imagine the animation would go crazy.
Teleported backwards 6 meters. Oh my God.
Dang. We might as well be 13, honestly. Sounds great.
Yeah.
So it's early access, right?
Yeah, and it's expensive. It's 20 something.
Wow.
So,
oof.
But it's Funcom who made Age of Conan.
And it's, I think it's definitely in a better state than Ark was at the same point. But then you kind of think, well,
is it?
Come on. Yeah. Yes. So it should be.
One day we will talk about a survival game that is good.
DayZ was good.
It was good, but then it stopped. That seemed to apparently stop being developed.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm looking forward to The Long Dark. I'm gonna wait out for that one.
Did you play? Have you played it already?
I played it years ago when it first went into early access, and it was like, oh, I love the way it looks and stuff. But obviously a long way to go. But I think that might have some chops.
Well, I'll tell you what, like The Flame in the Flood is good as well, and Don't Starve is good.
Oh yeah.
Like
Don't Starve's good. Yeah.
There are good survival games, but they tend to use like, this sounds stupid. The good ones are all like survival games on purpose.
I think it's like, so I did a thing about Astroneer recently, and about why Astroneer is fun. And I think it's because they made the moment to moment stuff of gathering resources feel good. Whereas it doesn't in most games. Like chopping at some tree or staring at a rock to mine it, it doesn't feel good. Like it's the thing that's in the way of doing. The guy said to me, Jacob, who's the lead designer on it, on Astroneer, said that they sort of see it as like all of the game is the game, not just the thing that you're aiming for.
Yeah. So
if you have that attitude, you can make, when you're sucking in sort of resources, when you're kind of on a planet, it feels good. Like, so you don't mind running off and running out of stuff and having to go and get it. You don't mind that you only have a small inventory, because simply traversing the ground and taking advantage of your oxygen system that you've built out into it and feeling like, oh, I've got a really nice system coming here that I've kind of built up. It feels like you're playing the game even when you're doing the obstructive stuff to the kind of your overall goals. Whereas playing Conan, the whole thing feels like an obstruction to whatever I feel the game is meant to be about. And I think the game is meant to be about having a massive fortress and smashing up other people's fortresses, which I think, and the rest of the game is just trying to slow you down to get to that point.
I think that's the thing. It's like most of the kind of the current wave of survival games don't have a substantially powerful like NPC threat necessarily. They're literally sandboxes. Like they're dinosaurs or monsters or whatever, but it's not like the zombies in DayZ where sometimes you get seen and you're fucked like for that life. Like that's over. Because that's where DayZ started, right? It didn't start out as survival crafting game. It doesn't really have crafting in it. It started out as zombie apocalypse in armor. And, can you survive it? And all of the interplayer dynamics in that game were the accident in a way of like what happens when you put people into this completely different scenario. Like, because the scenario itself at its basic level is compelling. It's like, you've got no food, you're going to starve to death, you've got no weapons, there are zombies. Go. See how far you get. And then you add the added dimension that brings kind of magic to the game, which is the fact that there are people there and they might help you and they might hinder you. But every life is intended to be short. You never really build anything. You may have a good life and that might last you a couple of days of going back to the game and you get good stuff. But every life is begun with the knowledge that you don't have a future. You are going to die and eventually, and no matter how well equipped you are, you could die from a stray bullet at any time. Whereas it feels like a lot of the current generation of survival games, the ones that I don't like, are the ones that are built around the idea that you will both play this forever and continue to gain power and build up a fortress.
Because your XP is
persistent.
Yeah. So,
but you will also face the kind of the minute inconveniences and threats and risk of life at such a granular level as well. And so it seems to lack the natural sense of escalation that DayZ had.
Well, also, because it's thinking about the long-term curve. And, once you're level, 7 or 8, like it really, you do start to grind and it's XP or going up levels that allows you to buy new crafting kind of things. Mm-hmm. So if you want a nice sword or whatever, you're going to have to grind for it. And that's not the DayZ thing at all. Like DayZ, it's luck or it's individual lives that you're kind of, you're thinking about that sort of scale, which appeals to me much more. Yeah.
I mean, before DayZ was sort of left behind, I think. The ideas they had for it were all about more persistence, but in a way it was great as this kind of like pure experience. And maybe you can't build maybe you can't build a profitable game that will support your company, that will go and go and go and go, that doesn't have those persistent elements and that doesn't draw players in with, there's a new thing to find.
Yeah.
Or it wouldn't be as satisfying for those players to know, there's a new thing to build. Or there's a new item in the game, but we've just hidden it somewhere and you might find it, but you might not. Versus this tech tree has new stuff at the end of it. If you want the broadsword that you can throw at people, then you need 80 pieces of iron, go stare at this hill, which is a much older Skinner box, right?
Yeah.
So it feels like that genre sort of collapsed in on itself very, very quickly.
I think
in the space of a couple of years.
Progression mechanics people have tried to attach to it have just been ill-suited and from completely different genres. So you can't put an MMO progression loop onto a survival game, which is what everyone does. So for DayZ, all I wanted was for the basic kind of interactions with the world to actually work properly, and for the zombies to not work through walls, and for there to be a basic level of fidelity to it, which they never achieved.
Yeah.
And if they'd have achieved that, and then said, here's a new island, I would go back to that game and have new lives on that island with new kind of places to secure. Then every, 6 to 8 months they go, here's a new territory and there's a new zombie type. That's the type of progression. But that maintains the short life loop and keeps you in the game. It's just that people have tried to just put on very kind of cheap, easily borrowed crafting systems onto situations that just don't warrant them at all.
Yeah.
So you need to add something to distract the player from the fact that they're just on a treadmill and that thing's a dick.
Big bouncy dick.
It's a big bouncy dick.
And boobs.
And boobs.
Conan.
Yeah.
Yes. The ultimate power fantasy. Well, I suppose that's the stupid thing with that fiction, right? Like,
well, this is it. You don't play a power fantasy at all. Like you constantly feel like a tiny, insignificant.
I like that MMO. I like that Conan MMO.
Yeah, it was all right.
Reviewing one of the expansions to it, it tried to do a kind of brackets combat system where you're just kind of guarding in directions and striking and stuff. And it was like genuinely trying to do that Conan thing of you being just someone in cloth fighting ridiculous, horrible things.
Yeah. Yeah, it does seem like a peculiar mismatch in terms of license and survival game.
And on the other hand, exactly what you'd expect for what a company would do today. Like if I was a big player, if I was a business guy.
You're a big player, Alex.
Oh, thanks, man. I am wearing a suit right now as well.
Yeah.
I'd make a survival game.
Yeah. Yeah. How would you differentiate yourself though? Conan's got dicks. Alex got dinosaurs.
Naked dogs.
So dogs.
It's been done.
All right. Teleporting dogs.
Time travel dogs.
Time travel dogs.
So,
That's the one.
like, GTA Online is huge. It's doing really well for Rockstar.
Yeah.
Do you think like a survival-esque game in the GTA universe would kill it?
Yeah.
Why hasn't Rockstar done it?
They basically, GTA Online is basically that though, right? You build up a steady
I suppose it is.
portfolio of resources, by,
true.
doing mini games and hunting players and
But instead of
and
chopping wood,
grinding.
you'd be robbing people.
Which you do in
Which you
GTA,
do,
right?
You do
Yeah,
GTA
yeah.
Online, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, they can't, I don't think they could or should do the stare at trees to get a Glock kind of.
They wouldn't do that. There'd be
Hopefully.
someone being killed by a gun involved in there somewhere.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's what people like doing in video games.
Yeah, but still. I'm sort of glad that wave seems to be fading. I don't know if it is. Maybe I'm just being blind to it. Yeah.
Oh, I think there's more yet to come. I think.
It's felt like it's been there's a constant amount of it, but it doesn't feel like the kind of tidal wave of everyone's in that it used to. Maybe that's just because maybe Steam's curation has gotten better. So the vast tidal wave of unfinished Unity Asset Store survival game demos has been hidden. Still bubbles away underneath the surface. I've been playing a game called Card Quest. Have you heard of Card Quest?
Yeah, I have.
Have you?
Is it super lo-fi?
Yes.
Yeah, I want to play some more of it. I've played maybe an hour or so.
Because Pip told me about it because she'd written a news story about it and just sort of suggested it to me, and I've sunk into it in a way I didn't expect, because it is super lo-fi. Like, I don't think anyone would object to the art being called rudimentary.
Yeah.
In a kind of old school, Ultimate Underworld, pixely kind of way.
It makes you kind of think the game won't actually function. Like, it's that kind of level art.
It's like, my RPG Maker sprites.
Yeah.
Level. And it's all like, sound effects from sound effect libraries, and it's been made by two people by all
I think
accounts.
it's in Arial as well.
Yeah. It's, like,
It's always good when you can identify the font, isn't it?
Yeah.
A normal word processor.
Tom, can you put wine in there?
I certainly can.
So it's, so what it is it's a, RPG card game about clearing encounters in a series of adventures, and it's in early access, I think, for a couple of quid. And there are currently 2 adventures, and the first one is the only one I played is like an undead infested town. And you pick one of 3 classes, which are fighter, wizard, and rogue, as you expect. And you beat these encounters, which are monsters that have certain, health values and attack values and traits in some cases. And they line up in front of you, and you play cards from your hand, and deal in various different resources based on which class you are. And then if you beat that encounter, you move on to the next encounter, and your health is persistent. And if you die, you go back to the start of the game. But you level up in a persistent way over time, which gives you access to like new schools of magic, and you can get items that you keep. So, at home I've been playing it. It doesn't transfer your save. So at home I've been playing it as the wizard, and that is really hard. But I've now got to a certain level, and I've it's that old, super old school dungeon crawler thing of pushing further and further into a set of repetitive challenges. and just trying to get a little bit further each time and trying to get a little bit further each time. And even though everything about it is extraordinarily lo-fi and only to some extent in a deliberate way, you get the impression, like, I think it has adopted the aesthetic of like Ultima Underworld or like a proper old school dungeon crawler, but it hasn't then like executed that with like a high degree of kind of like flair. It's kind of a little janky, but there's some pretty good, just pure card game design ticking away under the surface.
Yeah.
Like, it would work as a tabletop game, I think,
Yeah.
just in terms of playing cards against yourself. It's kind of like Monster Solitaire, really.
Yeah. It's really simple, really,
Yeah.
but really sharply defined.
Yeah, each class is impressively different as well. So like, it's all about like, it's the game for you if you enjoy the logic of a round of, like Magic the Gathering or Hearthstone or something like that. If you enjoy the logic of like, how do I do enough damage not to die here with the cards in front of me, which tap into various different resources and spend different resources in different ways, or might enable you to do a card draw if you combo it with another card. Some cards will start combos, other cards will end them, other cards will trigger off them. You have later get items and things, and then you have like a resource pool, and some of your cards are defensive, which means that they can only be used when it's the enemy's turn, and you choose when to give the turn to your opponent. So there's a big strategic dimension in like holding enough energy back to know that you can spend enough cards to mitigate all the damage you might receive. But then the different defense cards you have might interact with the enemies in different ways and do different things. And like, when it works really well, it's really compulsive to just try and resolve these little problems, because if you have an eye for rules and kind of seeing the potential synergies between things, you start to see like, oh, well, these are the three enemies I've got, and this is my way of dealing with it. So I'm going to mulligan this first hand in the hopes of getting this card, and I haven't drawn this card yet, so I'm going to discard 2 and draw 1 and tap for this and tap for that. And it really does kind of like flow really nicely when you're on a roll. When it's not working, it's because it's ultimately, a roguelike of a kind. Like, when you lose, that's it.
Yeah.
And it can screw you with the card draw. Like, it can absolutely prevent you from winning with the cards that you're dealt. And that is more pronounced, I think, for some of the classes than others. So the thing that I thought was really interesting was I started playing as the wizard, because of course I did. And I think informally I've discovered that the wizard is hard mode and the fighter is easy mode and the rogue is in the middle. And I don't think that's written anywhere, but I'll put it this way. I like accidentally played it for 2 hours in that kind of like, oh fuck this, I'm doing it again. And I played for ages and I got to like level 4 before I was able to beat the first boss as the wizard, because sometimes you just get fucked by an earlier encounter. And the wizard is all about knowing how to chain your damage spells together so you can basically kill everything before you have to defend. Because until a bit later on, if you get some items, your defenses are rubbish. You really don't want to take a hit, particularly because you can't heal and your health bar is persistent. And some bosses will just do a certain amount of damage. So if you've taken a couple of hits because of a bad draw and encounters earlier in the run, you should probably quit, apart from the fact that you might get XP, because that's probably not the run where you make it. And XP is a grind, and you don't get new stuff very regularly, so you know pretty much exactly what the parameters are for success. But, I stuck with it, and I ground around. I got pretty good with knowing where the synergies were within the wizard's deck, and, unlocked a different deck and started playing with that. And then after defeating the first boss, gave me an item that was a big enough power spike that I did all of the second zone, defeated the second boss, and then got all of the way to the boss of the third zone. But this was after like 2 hours, and I'd leveled up to like level 7 or 8 or something like that. And I'd had to like learn how that character worked inside out in order to do it.
Like at level 7, do you feel more insulated against kind of like the quite turn, you can lose your fortunes in a turn when you're kind of
so
levels.
that is specifically because you get items for defeating bosses, and you have to pick which one you're going to take with you. But I'll give you the example is that after beating the first boss, I got an item that's called like a blink stone or something, and I've always got it, and I can use it defensively to just put distance between myself and the entire line of enemies, which means that if they don't have ranged attacks, most of them don't, they have to spend their turn walking forwards rather than attacking. So, and that's huge because it means you get one extra turn of just not being killed, basically. But until I got there were turns where it's like, oh, I actually can't do enough damage to survive. There's no way for me to do it. So that's that. Or turns where it's like, well, I have to spend what energy I've got to draw a card. And if it's not the right card, I'm boned. And so there are problems like that. But then the thing that struck me today is at lunchtime, realizing it didn't cloud save, at work, I'll play as the warrior because that's a different thing. And I'd never played as that class before, had no idea how it worked. Do understand how the game works a little bit better, but I had to learn this class from scratch. And on my first attempt, I got to the third boss. And I leveled up to 4 on the way, but it was like, quarter of the amount of time it took me to get to the same place as the other class. So it feels, I don't know if that's a deliberate, easy, hard differential, like it's supposed to be that way, but it definitely felt like there was like a more satisfying game with one of the classes just because the way it was designed, I didn't feel like I could be screwed over by, and it's really interesting. Like they've done such a cool job of like meaningfully differentiating what it means to be a fighter versus what it means to be a wizard in the context of using cards to do stuff. So like the fighter has a load of different ways to not just mitigate damage, but to benefit from being hit, which other classes just can't do at all. So like you have a dodge card that's free if you've got it. And if you've got it, then it gives you loads of benefits for doing it. So you actually kind of want someone to swing at you because you want to be able to play the dodge. And you've also got a block, a block that reduces the damage of that particular opponent that you block by 1 for the next 2 turns. And then you have like an armor ability or like a defensive stance that means that 2 damage out of every incoming attack isn't mitigated for the next 3 turns, which is huge. Which means that if you're fighting 6 2 damage enemies that will kill a wizard in 1 turn easily, the fighter can just stand there and take it for 3 turns. But the downside of that is any defensive cards you use in that time, you're kind of wasting them because that's your free don't get hit time. So this is either the most boring thing in the world or super cool, depending on how into that kind of logic you are. But there's something really satisfying of like when you start to grok it and it's, when you can look at the cards in your hand and know exactly how to play it to take no damage from an encounter and very efficiently spend damage and sort of master the randomness of the card draw and stuff and end up kind of like perfecting encounter after encounter. And when you get a bit of a head of steam like that, that's how you end up making more headway into what is a lot of game. Like I say, I've gotten to the 3rd boss of the first mission. There are 2 missions and that is like less than a third of the way through the first one. And you have to go back from the start every time you play it.
Bloody.
So it could last you, like it has that old school, the RPG that was on your 486 that you never finished because it was functionally infinite feel to it. Which is cool for a couple of quid. Yeah. It's really impressive to think of design. Don't know if that matches your experience with it, Alex.
I haven't played enough to like, but I recognise that getting to grips thing, which I didn't play long enough in that session to do. I installed it on the laptop I work on, you see, and that's a bad place for games to be because I'm not allowed to play them there. It's a worky place.
What was it called?
Card Quest.
Card Quest.
So
that's the most forgettable name.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's descriptive. You're on a quest and there are cards.
That's true.
Yeah. And like, I was initially a little bit put off by the trailer because the trailer makes it look like quite a different game to what it actually is, I think. Because it's not really like a collectible card game. Like, as I've seen it so far, I think maybe you can earn new cards, but like, I haven't yet. Like, it is like each class has its little deck and they are, specific and you can unlock a new one, but it'll be an entirely new deck. You're not swapping out individual cards or coming up with a strategy in that way. I
find that encouraging because my experience with collectible card games is that they just run away ahead of me. Before, I'll keep pace with them for a time, but the more they start to release new cards, which obviously they have to for their business, the more the kind of overall meta and the rules of the game change to the extent that I just can't devote the time to understanding how to play the game anymore.
I struggle with just starting cards for a lot of games.
Yeah, so like Hearthstone's gone there. Yeah. Gwent will go there.
Yeah, I think the fact that this is just this sort of little single player thing, like the thing I'd put it close to is Solitaire. Like it is in that category.
It feels really up close and kind of personal, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is just like something you run in a window and just sort of
battle Solitaire.
Yeah, it's like it is. That is exactly what Regency Solitaire was, pretty much. But like, I think it's in that category, even though its aesthetic is much closer to a traditional CCG battle game. It feels more like a kind of little pattern that you resolve. And the frustration that comes with that is sometimes it'll just fuck you over. And I think if you go into it with that RPG mindset of, if I do this perfectly, nothing can go wrong, it can sometimes be like, and fuck you. Because you just might not get the card you need. You might mulligan the first hand you dealt, which has a cost associated with it. Right. And the second hand is worse. And then you have been playing for half an hour on this run, and that's that. And so I do think there are problems with it. Like, I do think it could, like the, you know, God knows we've spoken enough on this podcast about Spelunky and FTL and games like this, but it's in that mold. It has FTL style kind of node picking as you're kind of threading your way through through each area. But there's in Spelunky, the systems are so dynamic and kind of brilliant and the levels are so interesting that even if you don't quote unquote get something out of a run, you know that the next one's not going to be the same. Whereas the runs in this are pretty similar.
But you have the pleasure of figuring out these little individual encounters. Like, it's a little puzzle game.
And, you know, there's lots of story stuff in FTL which isn't in this. And then, there are other games like something like Rogue Legacy, which is getting on a bit now, or...
Yeah, I didn't like Rogue Legacy very much.
There were things I liked about Rogue Legacy, but I think the games that do this sort of charge into the same dungeon over and over again and hope for something to change do a good job of, like, every time you come back out again, new toy, new thing, substantial shift in playstyle, that kind of thing. Darkest Dungeon being another example of this.
I find it very interesting watching people like Northern Lion play. So he was really into Spelunky, but what's the Edmund Macmillan game? Binding of Isaac. And the way he played it, like high level, very, like he was doing builds every time. Like he had like he was running a strategy, but also, you know, in order to run a strategy for, you know, a run, you have to know the likelihood of things happening. So, I'm going to go for this kind of build. It isn't that likely that I will get this on level, whatever it is that will, you know, is likely to appear, but I'm going to have a go. And if that doesn't work, then I can fall back to such. It was interesting to see that at that level where, you know, he's not earning stuff anymore. He is doing it for that game. You know, like he's playing it not for the overall progression, but for kind of like.
Yeah, I feel like Card Quest is a bit too lightweight for that. I think it would benefit from probably more less impactful upgrades, and maybe more chance of getting them at different times, or like taking risks, like some mechanic whereby you could double down on the risk of a fight in order to get a chance of getting an upgrade and tinker with your build for the next run. Yeah. Because after I've gotten those items that have made it easier, like after I got to that point, the stuff that took me hours to crack, I can now do every time. But I'm not making any decisions. I'm just using the better thing, right? So it's not like I'm going back and going, well, what if I approach this differently? What if I do a run where I'm going to shoot the shopkeeper, which is the FTL example. Yeah. Sorry, the Spelunky example. Yeah. You are basically, the satisfaction comes from getting better and better and better at negotiating the rules of the combat system, which is more sophisticated, I would argue, than equivalent systems in other games like this. But you don't have that sort of macro scale, how my overall strategy has changed thing that other games do really well, or the chance to get some upgrade halfway through a run that changes the character of that run. It does feel like running back at the same challenges over and over and over again, relying on A, your increasing expertise, but also B, that little hope that it's not just going to screw you over with the card draw or the sheer chance of it. And that, I think, is a weakness. I think it's a weakness that's mitigated by the design of the fighter class. And that comes down to the fact that, in games, health bars are really important. Like, if you can live for longer, you can do more stuff. And so fighting slower and more survivably is, over a longer period of time, more strategically interesting than being the glass cannon that has to kill everything or will instantly lose. Because, you know, when the fighter gets screwed by the card draw, you probably take a couple of damage you didn't want to, but you have ways of clawing it back. Yeah. Whereas the wizard, it's just over most of the time. And that's a game design thing to unpick. But that is a nitpick for what is a £6 pretty
Better than
impressive.
it looks game.
Yeah, way better than it looks.
Yeah.
I'll put a link in the show notes because I wouldn't be surprised if people haven't heard of it because I think it's pretty new. It only came out a couple of days ago into early access. And I should say, as an early access thing, I think like there's a third mission or third quest that isn't available at the moment, but it feels like it's not, I think it'd be hard for a game that rudimentary to be notably buggy or like unfinished. But obviously there's always more you can add to a game like that, but it's not like, you're not getting a full game, but you're getting a lot of a finished idea, at least. Like the core loop is done. They've figured out what that is.
Sounds like a good lunchtime game.
It is a very good lunchtime
I'm
game.
going to try it tomorrow.
Yeah. You should jump on, give it a go because it's,
Yeah. Because that's perfect. I was listening to podcasts anyway while I'm playing stuff at lunch. So it was like the frustration of being instantly killed arbitrarily is lessened by it just being a waste of pass time.
yeah. It's a good way to pass time. It's, it would be an amazing pack in with Windows.
The new Minesweeper.
Yeah, indeed.
Nice. Shall we do questions?
We should, but first we should also do
Clarifications.
Clarifications from clarifications.
And an apology.
And maybe an apology. So during the break, we discovered that for that entire last 1 million years that I was talking about Card Quest, and Alex and I were talking about the game we'd both played.
Our shared experience
of the game Card Quest. We were in fact talking about completely different games that are nonetheless apparently the same if you describe them using all of the words I used. So Alex, what did you think I was talking about?
I thought you were talking about Dream Quest.
Well, I wasn't.
Yeah, that's weird.
What is Dream Quest other than...
Dream Quest is a card-based dungeon crawler with very rudimentary graphics.
No, you guys are talking about the same game again, surely. I mean, as an,
So-
third-person observer of this conversation, don't understand the difference.
So I guess, I don't know who we apologize to, but you, the listener, the creators of either Card Quest or Dream Quest, everybody involved in this.
I think everybody on Earth, except for Donald Trump.
He's allowed to get them mixed up. Everyone else.
Exactly. I hope you were
Must be
confused
clear.
by this, Donald.
I hope you bought both and realised that one of them wasn't the one you were looking for.
Should have checked the show notes. I don't know why this has gone in that direction, but it has. So that happened. That was a strange thing.
Yeah.
Why did you realize that I wasn't talking about that game?
I started to fear it, or at least I kind of fear is a constant in my life.
I'm wrong fear.
You just started to say, they've just started getting a feeling, and I just thought, is this definitely, and is this the one? So you may have heard me say that it used the font Arial. Card Quest does not use font Arial.
No, it doesn't.
Dream Quest does.
That's how you can tell them apart.
As accidental slights go, it's not such a major one that
Because it could have been Comic Sans.
it could have been Comic Sans. It should have been
could, yeah.
deeply libelous.
It's just more evidence of the...
They're both good games though, and you should buy them all, and they're all very cheap.
Wow. Okay. I was going to say this is more evidence of, the inherent incompetence of our profession. But
well, that too.
Sure.
It could be two things. Come on.
Why not both? Anyway, so I'm glad we cleared that up. We can now move on to other questions. And this time they're coming from questions. Scroll up. I wasn't ready. Professor Chaos writes, who I believe has just been named Secretary of State. He writes, how would each of you describe yourselves? Crate or crowbar?
I would definitely describe myself as a crate
I knew you would. I knew when I saw this question that'd be the answer.
with an arm coming out of it shoveling cooked pork into it until it swells and starts to kind of splinter and...
Like one of those little novelty money boxes that you put the coin on and the
That's
hand
right.
comes out and drags
But
it in.
the coin, nothing will happen but pork. Then it activates.
Like a little pork medallion.
The pork medallion right in. This has just been my Christmas, just as
You make excellent pork medallions. I'll say that for you.
I've eaten a lot of those, Chris.
That's how you know how to make them.
Absolutely.
That's how you discovered that recipe.
Absolutely.
You killed a lot of pork.
I mean, now I'm going to spend the rest of my year working out and doing exercise to become a crowbar. Maybe in 5 years' time, it's going to take a while. The pork medallions are not healthy.
No.
I think I'm a crate as well. I'm passive vessel.
exist for storage.
I think I know what you are, though, Chris.
What am I?
You're a lovely, lovely, lovely crowbar.
You reckon? I don't know if crate life would suit me.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could, yeah.
Shovel pork into your cob for eternity.
I get impatient. Just want to crack open boxes, I guess.
There you go. No, perfect.
It's the giver and the taker, isn't it? These two things.
Really?
Blimey. That's turned our logo into a metaphor that I wasn't prepared for then.
I imagine it was what Marsh was thinking about, but no one else was thinking
Probably,
about it at the time.
This makes sense now.
As is one. He's definitely a crate.
So I think Tom Francis is a crowbar.
Yeah.
I think Tom Francis is a crowbar. Graham.
Ooh, that's an interesting one. He's both.
Wow.
Blimey. Interesting.
Yeah, I guess he is.
He wields the stick.
It's an intersectional.
Like an iron box.
But he also has a strong, embrace.
He's a relaxed crowbar.
A floppy crowbar.
Pip, I'm not sure. I think Pip's a secret crowbar.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
Stealth crowbar.
I think
Stealth
people might
crowbar.
incorrectly assume crate,
Yeah.
but actually crowbar.
Yeah.
I hope that is informative. Zed Fang writes, if you could magically make it so a game you've played sold a few million more copies than it did, which game would it be?
I announced this. It's DMC, the Devil May Cry reboot. And it's partly, I remember this because Rich Stanton has been just tweeting GIFs of it and little videos of it all week because he's gone back to it. And I've beat that game like 4 times now. Like, it's so good. I love it. It's an amazing.
It's really good.
Super slick, beautifully presented, combat game. And it was just completely maligned and just almost just, vilified on social media by a fan community that just,
How could Ninja Theory know how to make a Devil May Cry game?
I know, holy crap, Ninja Theory. I mean, and also just on such kind of dumb grounds, like, Dante doesn't look how he should look, and doesn't act how he should act, having not played the game, and just there's this kind of force of assumption that, I don't know, seemed to crush it. No one was allowed to just play it and enjoy it and kind of talk about how good it was.
Yeah.
And it's great.
I love that
Great
game. That was really rad. I liked it. It was not a direct peer of Bayonetta, but it was around the same time. And I love both of those games for taking essentially the Devil May Cry formula and like making them cool and feel new and fresh and quite subversive, but in completely different ways. Like Bayonetta really embraced the strangeness of it. But kind of amped up how kind of subversive and camp and kind of like powerfully like queer that game was, right? Like it's this kind of amazing, like, cause there's, the traditional Devil May Cry games are like hyper sexualized, but, often in a traditional comic booky video gamey way, whereas Bayonetta took it in a completely different.
Yeah, camp, that's really
Sort
was
of-
high
yeah.
camp. Yeah.
Yeah, precisely. Bayonetta remains one of my favorite games of all time. And then DMC was the answer to like, what does the kind of the punk rock version of Devil May Cry look like? What does Devil May Cry look like with a political consciousness? And that
And
was
a
rad.
lot of the precision as well. It kept precision in as well.
Yeah, fundamentally the same sort of core, but like a different kind of swagger to it. And I really admired it. Like, it's one of those games that, like, I think I may have said this on the podcast before, but like, it's one of the few games that I daydream about making a sequel to, even though I have none of the expertise. Like, it's one of the settings, one of those ideas that like keep sparking off other ideas. Like, I love the idea of like a really hyper stylish, fun, fast paced protest game.
Yeah, that's a really good point because it reminded me of like 2000 AD in the way that 2000 AD just takes modern trends and people and just puts them into their comics.
Yeah.
And in a quite a light-hearted and easygoing way. And DMC absolutely did that. It was in that tradition of just, you fight your way through a Fox News channel.
Yeah.
Like it just
That is one of the best bits of,
which is amazing.
yeah, like the moment when you dive off the bridge because there's that broadcast tower for what is essentially Fox News, demon Fox News, and you hit the water and under the water is the inverted reality where the Fox News tower is
truth is
actually the kind of
revealed.
like the
Yes.
hell the hell mirror of it.
I
Like,
forgot about
there's
that.
so many great little visual ticks in that game. And obviously it's heavy-handed, but it is heavy-handed in the way that 2000 AD is heavy-handed. And it's not afraid of going all the way to reality with those comparisons. Like, you fight big demon Bill O'Reilly, and there's no doubt that that's what the influence is. Like, that is a good game to replay now. Like, that is again, things you wouldn't expect it to have been prescient. DMC.
It's the sort of stuff that video games are so scared of doing normally. Like, it actually showing things that vaguely represent reality, like modern politics in any way. Especially in such like, it's kind of a lot of it's kind of adolescent and dumb, but that's totally Devil May Cry, like, isn't it? It's the kind of teenage rebellion of being a guy with slightly shit hair and a long coat.
Yeah, the sword's literally called Rebellion.
Yeah, indeed. Really, really great game, and it's a shame that it didn't seem to do very well for such petty reasons.
Yeah, I actually totally agree with that. I'm going to say Tribes, but for the same reason I always say Tribes.
Nice.
Because it's one of the best kind of gamiest concepts for a shooter ever, but it was just not popular enough to survive. Right, Tom.
Sorry, my chair is pressing against some sort of ancient grave that appears to be opening.
I think you might be slightly caressing the box.
This is the box that Pip nearly fell into.
Yeah, indeed. That's causing problems in successive episodes, and I'll have to get rid of it. But yes, so there's like, I would pick Tribes just because that's stay completely still. I'd say Tribes just because it's like, it makes complete sense that it wasn't a financial success, and it's basically never been a financial success. But I want to live in the universe where people are like, yeah, I want to play a hyper-technical game about frisbees and skiing.
I think it's probably sold all right, but I was going to suggest SteamWorld Heist. It's a newish game, but it's a really, really nice 2D side-on tactics game, turn-based tactics game with kind of real-time aiming and that kind of thing, but you're taking turns against things. It's really nice style, beautifully made. Kind of first came out on 3DS, but actually on PC, it's like feels native to it as well. It's a lovely game, a lovely, lovely game. Really, really sort of lots of attention to detail, generosity, smart, interesting.
Nice.
Lovely. Good. Kubetsky writes, will LAN parties ever return?
They never went away.
Return? They were always here.
I mean, maybe lots of the little one. You don't get all the little ones anymore.
No. And there's less, when I was a teenager, I worked in an internet cafe with a LAN bunker that I ran. And that was that feels like a thing of the past now. Like, you wouldn't pay a couple of quid for the afternoon to play Counter-Strike with your mates. You would just play it on Steam. But Insomnia is still a thing.
Social gathering thing is like that element of it still very much exists.
Insomnia still exists, and DreamHack still exists. I think possibly the bigger thing here is whether or not games have LAN support.
Yeah,
that certainly eats into what you can do in terms of.
So, like Overwatch, does that have?
No, and actually, so that came up today because we asked our community on the PC Gamer Discord to help us come up with some questions for a Q&A with the Overwatch developers. And somebody asked for LAN support, and there was a double take because they had typed in all lowercase and we couldn't figure out why they required Ian support. Did the game not natively support Ians? Did they feel like there wasn't a character called Ian and therefore no one...
There aren't enough game characters called Ian overall.
Titanfall 2 gets very close. It has a Titan called Ion that I always see as Ian and think of as Ian. So there's that. You've got, that's probably your best choice for an Ian party. But no, it doesn't have LAN support. So that is, I suppose, the thing.
Presumably they do. They must have a LAN version that they can take to DreamHack or for. Yeah,
they must do, unless they use their servers. Yeah. Which could be the case. I don't know. That is, I think that's a legit concern. But, when broadband is so ubiquitous and the services for these games are pretty much reliable, there's less draw to be like, hey, everyone come logo your PCs around my house. We'll play games all weekend, right?
Yeah, I've not done it since Left 4 Dead 1, about 15 years ago. So maybe it has just died out I just think the voice communications on a headset and just general just kind of communication tools within games have become so much better that you can replicate a lot of that stuff just through normal online gaming now.
Yeah.
Which is great.
But yeah, they're still around. I guess actually that presumes you're in the UK or Sweden where these things happen. I don't know about. I think does QuakeCon have a big LAN component?
They do, yes.
Yes.
You say it. Yeah.
So there's that. So there are things. I mean, yeah, but they're just not necessary anymore, I guess, for the smaller purposes that they used to be used for. Next up, Jay writes, "Greetings, Harpocrates and Cronus. Now that you're starting the Patreon up again, fruity semicolon, have you considered providing your adoring listeners with the opportunity to vote on or posit suggestions with respect to the types of additional content we would like to see through the Crate and Crowbar? Question mark. Personally, I would patron £10 a week for the next 40 years. If you fine folk could commit to a Dark Souls 3 playthrough in a similar vein to those you did for Dark Souls 1 and 2, please, I love you." Keep up the excellent discussion and comedy, Jay. Thank you very much. So once I answer this, we're not going to confirm anything because we've learned our lesson.
There are plans.
We've made some plans. We've got some ideas with things like we do. So we have, but put it that way, we have our ideas for what we would like to do, which are based on things that we're interested in and so on. I'm totally up for people like the Patreon questions channel on our Discord, which you'll find a link to in the show notes and on the website, is a good place to say the kinds of things you would like to see us do with spin-offs, because we are conscious that, we have this audience that came here for PC gaming hot takes and dick jokes.
Which will always be there.
Yeah, which will always be there. That's not going to change. But then, spinning off is necessarily going to divide that. Not everyone's going to be interested in the miniatures wargaming stuff that me and Tom are going to be talking about, or even the next thing we do or whatever. So if people are interested in particular stuff, it'd be really interesting to know that. But I think, I'll speak for everybody, but I think that we'll primarily be led by the things that we are enthusiastic about rather than doing specific things on demand.
Yeah, it's always interesting to hear kind of formats that people like. So you can get in touch with us via Twitter and Discord, via email, which we'll read out at the end of the podcast. And anything, we read all of it. Like it all goes into the mind space.
Yeah. The brain tank.
The brain tank.
The dream chamber.
And it's really fun to hear
the hot nozzle.
People kind of give us guidance on what they'd like to see us do.
Yeah.
But it's always like we're not going to do something unless we're passionate about it. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. But
indeed.
We'd love to hear what you think.
So I mean, I could say that like things we are thinking about, and not in any huge specifics, but like possibly some new video stuff. Probably something I would really like to do is some like live play pen and paper role playing things. I'm happy saying that in a vague sense because we don't have a timescale for it yet. But it's that kind of thing. It's more about fun stuff to listen to and watch that is sort of orbits the periphery of the games that we're talking about on the main podcast. However, if there are specific games that people are interested in hearing spin-offs for and things, then that's absolutely something. Like if we have that, impetus to do it, because that is kind of the key, right? For us is that this is done very off the cuff. I don't know if that has shown over. Have you
noticed the last 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, the last 174 of these. But like the reason the Dishonored thing kind of really clicked when it did is because like if you put me and Tom Francis in a room at that time in our lives, we would just talk about Dishonored 2 forever. And then we recorded a 3.5 hour podcast with no break because all we did was just happen to press record. And that, that comes very naturally. And we're kind of, I guess, willing to take suggestions and kind of spin off and see if we can do stuff. But I think just for the sake of everyone's sanity, it needs to be something that it can never feel like we're just doing it cause. We have to kind of really be excited about the idea.
I'll say this is also stuff that the Patreon stuff allows us to do. Like, you never, the Crane Crowbar's not going to change. You're going to get the Crane Crowbar as it has been, since we started. But
hopefully better.
Hopefully better. Alex, thank you for improving on the level of bants that we've experienced.
I bring the bants.
You bring the bants.
Yeah. What a ledge.
But yeah, the Patreon allows us to do extra projects and stuff. So check that out.
Yeah. And yeah, long story short, Patreon channel, tell us what you'd like to see, and
Yes.
we will do our best to do it in a way that makes sense. Or in a way that doesn't make sense, which is how we do everything else. So that's that.
Mm-hmm.
Matt writes, I used to play quite a lot of Minecraft back when it was still thought of as an indie game and not the Microsoft-owned Second Life for under 10s it is now. And as such, I'm still on the mailing list and follow the Twitter. My question is, does it weird you guys out as much as it does me to see perky missives such as Mob of the Week being written by former graveyard dweller and artisan penis renderer Marsh Davies? All the best, Matt. An excellent question that went sideways halfway.
It's a very accurate description of
It is.
Marsh.
It's one of, I mean, I've read a lot of accurate descriptions of Marsh, and that's up there. Alex, you've got it.
Hey, I've got some dirty secrets.
You do. But you know, you're a Minecraft content man.
Yeah, I've been writing on that website as well. And I've been in the Twitter thing.
You did a book.
They made so Marsh and his boss, Owen, they used to live together here as well in Bath. They went to university together, but they've got little caricatures of themselves on their website, and they made one for me because I did some writing for them.
No.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was good fun. They're nice. It's nice. And I wrote a book about Minecraft as well.
You did, yeah.
Love Minecraft.
And yeah, you know, I don't think it's not necessarily weird, because, you know, he's a professional. Doesn't have to draw a dick on everything. That's his private life.
He does. I think, but he has drawn a dick on everything he's ever drawn. Yeah. It's there to be found.
I think that's, you're worried about libel at the beginning of this, at the beginning of this podcast. I think maybe we need to.
That was untrue.
That is untrue. I think Marsh knows when a dick is right and when it's wrong. And yeah.
It's taken him 25 years to get to that.
Yeah, at least. But no, I think we can trust there aren't any hidden dicks in that Minecraft stuff. And, you know, Marsh is capable of wholesome. I can't back that up. It is surprising. Yeah, you're completely right. I've looked at the wrong thing. Michael writes, hello, podders. Since we're inevitably heading towards the collapse of modern fucking society as we know it, what are your favourite games that accurately reflect a dystopian society that are not called Fallout? Thanks for the pod. Sincerely, the one American named Michael in Discord. Yes, silly?
I was thinking Homefront a bit here.
Homefront?
Homefront 2 specifically.
Really?
A little bit.
Why?
Because it's kind of gritty Philadelphia, so it kind of rains a lot. Frame rate, it's a bit dodgy.
That's what happens in the post-apocalypse.
And,
So it's forget the Bible, it's the great precursor of the end of days.
you're rushing about on the streets.
And then
trying to
stuttering and
avoid-
rubber banding happens, and it's like, we're all fucked. This is it. This is the end.
As we said earlier, you know when the rubber banding hits.
Yeah, you're going to feel it.
I was going to go with Command and Conquer 2 Yuri's Revenge.
Wow. I hope we get that apocalypse. At
Because
this stage, to be
because
honest, that'll be
there
They
are
hadn't invented war dolphins by that point.
there are like, you know, because if anything, and I mean, we go political sometimes, but whatever, like there's, for a while you might sort of intone sincerely about the Papers, Please dystopia, or any of gaming's more recent evocative representations of oppression and so on. Even something like Inside, its sort of sci-fi element notwithstanding, has a sort of that atmosphere of oppression around it. However, the stranger things become and the worse things get, I suspect you can't really count anything out, which is why I'm not counting out the psychic militarized dolphin reality.
Or a bald psychic coming.
Honest to God, a plot by a magic psychic Russian vizier to subvert the timeline. Okay.
Better off.
Yeah. That's, could even be better.
Well, if that's a Washington Post headline by this time next year, then we should definitely promote ourselves as, oracles.
Exactly. But, nothing's off the table now, so why not?
I think, weirdly, the most convincing post-apocalypses I've encountered in films rather than games, so stuff like Children of Men, where it's just very familiar architecture, just tweaked in ways that would make sense for a dystopian society. Whereas what you see in a kind of dystopia is a very in games, very kind of from the ground up invented dystopia, where it's like, this has always existed as a dystopic, dictatorship society. So like it's stuff like Midgar, where in Final Fantasy VII, where there's, what if the underclass was under a giant disc, and all the cheerful people lived on top of the disc, and all the people who were oppressed lived under the disc, and just this sort of giant, just blatant, kind of realization,
architectonic metaphor.
Exactly. Whereas the reality is just something much more, just a slightly warped version of familiar reality.
Films also, they get to do dystopias that don't need to be solved for the power to come through. Whereas in a game, if you don't get to solve the dystopia to fix it all, then, you don't get your power trip.
I think, we shouldn't forget Half-Life 2 here as a good representation of a dystopia built on top of a believable world.
Yeah.
That isn't resolved as well.
Yeah. How did we forget that one?
I don't know. It's because it's been completely out of the headlines for
it's a very good
13 years. There's that. There's also, there's a lot of, I'm a big fan of the Metro games. I think they are a kind of very, not believable in the sense that it could happen necessarily, but a sort of lived in dystopia, kind of fully realized sense of a different world without
what's everyday life like.
Yeah, what is it like to live there? Stalker as well, actually. That kind of, again, Russian sci-fi has always been really good at placing a few science fiction or supernatural elements in the kind of the gritty reality of everyday life, and I think selling it on that basis. It's not something games do a lot, but I think those games do. Actually, it'd be interesting, coming back to the point about food, it really stands out when games get those little details or lavish attention on those little details and kind of sell the place through these small things. Not to say that Final Fantasy 15 is a good example of a realistic dystopia, because it clearly isn't. But
what are you talking about? Like, it's got naked dogs.
It has got naked dogs.
It's got naked chocobos.
That's a utopia, Tom.
Shit, of course.
But games, maybe the reason games don't have so many kind of relatable dystopias is because relatively few games, like you say, pay attention to life at that level. There's a good article came out today on Games Industry Biz that I'll stick in the show notes by Alexis Kennedy, who's one of the founders of Fail Better, which is about the kind of the weakness of the idea of world building. In this, particularly when it comes to the idea of making a fictional universe from the ground up completely your own, because you always end up with an analogy of some kind or another. But there's a good point in there, which is I think a quotation from Tolkien about how, in the context of a fairy story or a fantasy story, actually the things that often seem most sort of vibrantly real are things like the food and the kind of the small details of real life, which I think is true if you think about what you actually remember from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And often the food isn't that different to our food, just it stands out that this normal thing exists in this strange place.
It ties your experience to that.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Whereas games tend to be all heightened actions and heightened things in a heightened reality, and therefore maybe the dystopias don't ring quite as true. Or if they wouldn't, if real life wasn't doing so much work to catch up.
That's interesting. It's almost like a combination of just everyday habit and architecture. Like, you need some recognition on both fronts for it to feel like a more relevant dystopia. So Stalker is incredible because you go into abandoned towns that feel completely realistic, like the brutalist architecture of, discarded Soviet structures that have been taken over by demons. But nonetheless, when you see that their kind of forms against the horizon and move into them, they feel like familiar places because, you see those brutalist echoes throughout Western architecture. And then also, if Stalker had better food, maybe it'd be an even more convincing.
Yeah, I guess when I say food, I mean almost like
Just
the
something
small details
tangible.
of real life, right?
Yeah, tangible.
Yeah,
kind
like
of
just a
association
guy
of
playing
things.
guitar, at a campfire. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Stalker.
Yes.
The game I was going to bring up actually is Cart Life,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
was that sort of simulation of just getting through the days in the life of. Are you an immigrant, like a recent immigrant in Cart Life? I can't remember.
Well, there are several characters.
Yeah, there are. Aren't there?
I think that one of them is an immigrant. Yeah.
Yeah, which I mean, that game is several years old now, but it's probably it has retained its power, and I think one of the reasons it's retained its power is it's not explicitly set in a dystopia. It's set in the real world. It's set in the real world where you're poor, which guess what is a dystopia. That's and it rather than spin a fiction around you, it simply encourages you to experience some small sense of the pressures of genuine poverty, and that is enough to tell a dystopian story. But in that sense, obviously abstracted because the graphics are very lo-fi, but like completely unfantasized kind of real world. So yeah, that is the polar opposite of Red Alert 2.
We've been on a grand journey.
Yeah, exactly.
The difficulty is as well that if you're creating entertainment products that are supposed to be perhaps in some way escapist, then putting someone into an even worse version of the future they recognise is not necessarily a great way to do it.
Or at least giving them no power. Because with Cart Life, I mean, I couldn't play very much of. Well,
No.
I did play quite a lot of it, but I didn't enjoy it. You're not meant to, or at least, yeah, not necessarily. And it's a very powerful and I think a really good game, but I didn't want to play it.
No, indeed. And like, yeah, I mean, to dial back to like a conversation we had right at the start of this episode, like whatever, in addition to maybe seeing some of the ways the world is changing reflected in games and hopefully not seeing the worst attitudes of that reflected in games, it'll also be interesting to see if games shift the nature of the escapist fantasies they offer in response to the ways in which the world is changing.
Yeah,
because
that's interesting.
there are, games have for a long time been about, overcoming injustice or revenging yourself against injustice and putting the world back the way it should be, and all these things that are kind of very common themes of any kind of adventure fantasy fiction. But are escapist in their kind of present form, and not just because they are sort of fables, but because they explicitly like raise the stakes in the way that real world stakes, at least in our slice of the world, have never really seemed. Whereas it feels like the shock of the world at the moment is people coming to terms with the fact that things can get quite as bad as they are, if that makes sense. If the can actually, the false sense of security being shattered and the realization that real change is necessary and real action is warranted is a strange thing. So it'll be interesting to see if games shape the fantasies they offer, because it felt like it's happening in other media, right? Like
But even games did. I mean, around they have managed to, like around 9/11 and everything that came afterwards. You've got all these sort of fantasies about attacks on American mainland.
That's true,
You've got more thoughtful responses on what it means to, use serious fight power on. I can't think of examples now, but
like Spec Ops: The Line, something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think those are all expressions of what happened there. I'd be surprised if it doesn't get this. I mean, even in the 80s, a lot of games, comics particularly, media like that, expressed what it was to live in Thatcher's Britain as a young person. So I think. Yeah,
inevitably it will. It will, I suppose. It'll be interesting to see what form that takes, because in some ways they're the fantasies that we've been living out for a long time. But I guess maybe those stories have greater resonance. Now I think about this because I went to see Rogue One again for the third time. That shouldn't surprise anybody. But I admire that film more the more I've seen it, and I think it also stands out as, I'm not going to spoil anything about it, but it stands out as a strange, like not a strange thing to exist, but a very pointed thing to exist at this point in time. The sort of the form that Star Wars, this is the biggest entertainment thing in the planet, has chosen to temporarily adopt as this story about how difficult meaningful resistance to kind of fascist power is, and what sacrifices it demands, and the people that it places the most pressure on are often also the most vulnerable people. And even though it's an adventure movie, all those themes are in there, and the notion, and the sort of the diversity of people that it puts in front of you as representative of humanity, as opposed to this sort of kind of totalitarian idea or the other way. It's Star Wars has never been pointed or prescient or anything, and so to see it sort of adopt that shape is kind of interesting, particularly at this point in history when it couldn't have been planned for. So it'd be interesting to see what happens after that, when this generation of creative people who feel furious and powerless now start to
Make stuff.
That
was a good question.
It was a good question. I guess the most realistic dystopia
is our own.
Is this one. And that is all of the dystopia we've got time for.
It's been a good dystopia, though.
Has it?
I've loved it. Every minute. More dystopia, please.
Don't say that.
Why is it? Wine and chats?
Oh, so, okay. Yeah, no, I suppose that is what it means for us. If you'd like to send us a question for a future episode, you can do so by emailing us at questions@crateandcrowbar.com. You can also tweet us at Crate and Crowbar and hang out with our community on Discord. The link is in the top bar of the website, crateandcrowbar.com. Crate and Crowbar is supported by Patreon. If you'd like to find out more about what you could contribute to and how it all works and et cetera, you can find out more at patreon.com/Crate and Crowbar. If you'd like to follow us as individuals on Twitter, I am at C Thurston, that's CTHURSTEN. Tom is
at PCG Ludo, which is Elidio.
And Alex?
Rotational.
Like you're rotationing.
Rotating.
Al.
Nice.
Rotating Al. No, it's sorry, I've ruined that for you, and I'm sorry.
I think that's memorable now.
Okay, but also spelt wrong.
There's a guy out there called Rotating Al that is going to get some very strange
influx.
Oh, he loves it. But no, it's in the show notes. Anyway. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Goodbye.
You ruined it, Alex.
Oh.
You didn't really.